Um, I guess we'll leave it at that then. That we would we'll have that same, or someone would have to have that same conversation that you just talked about with Austin, and he is going to be at the he's going to be at one of our meetings. Jacqueline, I think you had them scheduled, someone scheduled for next meeting and then the following meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have Austin scheduled for the 14th and Scott for the 28th.
So if we don't get him between now and then, we can that's something we can discuss with him when we have him with the whole committee.
And there wasn't a rush, Joe, on the removal of the furniture and the items. There was time for that to happen. It didn't have to happen, in a month. It honestly could happen next summer. There's really no big rush.
Right, absolutely. And I had this kind of the same type of conversation with Bill Stableford after the last meeting, and his take on it. Well, there's a lot of good stuff there, and we should look at selling it. That I do not comment on that, but I don't believe that is a viable option, considering it's been stored and it hasn't been used, or anyone hasn't claimed it in 18 years. But just to let you know that this may not be there may be some people who think there are others who might think that there's something valuable in there that might be retained. Mementos of a desk when they were in 6th grade or 4th grade, I guess would be more like it. But
yeah, the first time I toured, I actually picked up something that it was I knew it was their son's item. And I took a picture of another person who is now 25, and his name was on over a coat hook. So we were the parents were cracking up on that one.
It's good for a few good laughs, but in terms of value and worth the time and effort to pull all that stuff out is not.
No.
I don't believe it is.
I think the
I don't
town
believe
would have some liability as well.
Yeah, let's not. I don't intend on going in that direction. Erin is not on. I haven't heard anything from her regarding any of the permits and their status. Jacqueline, has anything been reported to you? Has Erin said anything to you?
No, not. I'm just trying to think. No, unless she's talked to Mark. I know. Maybe no. Okay.
No.
I can check in with her tomorrow.
And I think our last liaison is Al.
Joe, were you just asking about the exchange with the land trust? Was that your question?
No, this Joe?
Yeah.
No, it was the permits for the 3 tanks that had been exhumed and now may or may not have the right paperwork available for them.
Did Bill's? I thought Bill responded to that. Jacqueline, were you part of that email, or were you, Joe? I thought I saw something from Bill on that after the first meeting. I thought we actually had the paperwork in place.
I think so too. And then they were just waiting to hear back from the state. Is that right, Mark?
Yeah. When you email the community, yeah, this was to you. They may want to see the tank report. So there was a report that was issued. Can I ask you to add Austin to the yada yada yada? Yeah, I don't know, but it sounds like we've got the paperwork in place from the state on the removal. So I think we're good. I mean, it's a lengthy document.
You'd get a certificate of closure for each tank showing there was no follow-up required.
Yeah, I don't know, Joe.
My concern is that phase 1 Adet said they did an exhaustive search of the deep records and found nothing.
Joe Ballantyne, I'm going to forward this to you. If you could pass it on to the rest of the committee, or specifically Joe Paradiso, so he could look at it. It's a. Yeah,
The last time I heard from Aaron, it was not, it had not been resolved. That one, I believe one of the tanks had the paperwork, the closure paperwork from the state. One might have, and then there was a third that had no, there was apparently no record whatsoever. That was the last I heard.
yeah.
If you
Maybe
send
we
that
should-
on, I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, I
And I'll
sent it
send-
to you,
I'll-
send it to Joe, and maybe we can table it for the next meeting.
If there is something to be resolved there, would that come out of the project budget or the town budget?
Well, I believe there was a fund available. Al, wasn't there a brownfield a
Some
grant?
environmental fund?
Yeah, that was available for this type of remediation. We do have in the budget, Joe, a hazardous material abatement line item, but it was more for the building, not for the site. But I do
Yeah.
remember hearing that there was a brownfield grant that was awarded that could be used for any soil remediation if there was any.
There was a grant awarded. I'm not sure whether it was just for study or whether it was for actual work, but we can certainly figure that out pretty quickly.
My recollection is it was for study. It was a study grant, not a work grant, not a remediation grant. But that was, again, I'd have to dig through the emails from Aaron, but Aaron would be on top of that. So maybe as a follow-up to this, I will reach out to Aaron tomorrow. Presumably, well, election day may not be the best day to reach out to someone in the town, but I will reach out to Aaron to see if we can get closure. And lastly, about the last of our liaisons, again, back to you, Al. I presume the OPM agreement is still on schedule to be voted on by the Board of Selectmen tomorrow?
That's correct. The selectmen meet 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and I have every reason to believe that contract will be approved tomorrow morning.
Okay, good. Like I actually saw a copy of it. There's none of the, there are some changes, but they're not anything that affects how we deal with Colliers. So that should be just should be fine. Any other thing on liaison or committee members' remarks? Okay. Hearing none, skip back up to number 3, the preliminary discussion of the request for proposal for architectural and engineering services. As you, as I explained, as I did send it out to everybody, and as explained, Mark had finished this so approximately a week earlier, and but I had held it until we were certain that this the OPM agreement was going to be approved, and it's going to be approved. Presumably, it'll be approved tomorrow, or we all believe it'll be approved tomorrow. So it was sent around to to everybody on the committee, and the purpose of this meeting was to discuss it, but not vote on it. We meet again in a week. So if there are any issues, we can, or anything that we would like clarified, we have time for Mark to be able to respond. And we also have time to do a little deeper dive into it if we, given more time, a little more time than just a few hours. So maybe I should open the floor to Mark to explain it, and or if anyone has a specific question, we can we can stop at some point if you sort of do a page turn, Mark, or what might look like a page turn, or even by section. And then if anyone who has a question on that section or a comment, we can jump in. Is that okay with everyone?
So just to be clear, Joe, we'll have another opportunity to ask questions on this document because I didn't have enough time to read through the whole thing.
And that is true. Presumably, we would have enough time. We would have enough time to get ready for the next meeting. And if there are, by the end of next meeting, we should be ready to vote. But I guess that we'll see if that's the case. But that would be the plan, to be ready by the end of the next meeting to vote on an approval of it, and then to get it out.
So my first comment would be then the schedule
Yeah,
is going to change in the document then, right?
correct. Yep.
Okay, just want to double check.
Yep. Yeah, the
Okay.
schedule will change as well as our milestone schedule. So yeah, we'll amend all of the dates so that they align not only with what's practical, but with the building committee schedule for the rest of the year.
Okay, great.
But yeah, so just to keep it high level, this is a blended request for qualification and proposal. In some cases, it's a multi-step where you do qualifications first, and then you shortlist the RFP. What we're doing is we're sort of blending it together so we can, get both qualification information and proposal information at the same time. So it just saves us a step in the process. This is a document that was used as a base for the work we're doing with the school project. So a lot of the town information just sort of carried over. The agreements and the appendices were reviewed by the town's attorney. So we're making some changes to the contracts. So a lot of it was already templatized, if you will, for Madison before we even got to the point of developing this. So what the general document reflects is, if you look at the project overview section, which is section 1, it's really just a narrative about the background of the buildings, the background of the process that has unfolded the last several years. Then we get into the project description, which is, okay, here's what we're looking to do. We reference what was done previously, community center with 2 offices identified to be users of the building, and then the rest of it largely flexible space. You'll notice in the appendices, I did not include the pre-referendum layout because I don't want, let people come in and look at it from their own perspective. I did include the existing floor plans so they have them so they can piece together some concepts, but I did not issue now, if somebody wants to do a little bit of research, they can find it. It's online somewhere. There's lots of presentations, but I wasn't going to share that with them.
So where did you get the floor plans?
I don't know. When did we start talking about this building? 5-6 years ago. The town had a lot of pre-existing information, Joe. So the existing hazmat report, the site survey, the floor plans, all of that came from a large data dump, probably in 2017-ish, plus or minus. And I just stuffed that in a folder and dusted it off, a few weeks ago. So
will the floor plans that would be included in the RF? Is this an RFP and RFQ? What is?
It's both. It's an RFQ/P.
Okay, and will all those blank pages at the end be filled in by next week?
The appendices?
Yes.
Oh yeah. I have 80% of those appendices already. I've got the schedule, and I'll talk about that stuff. I've got the schedule and the budget information. I just didn't include it in here. I could send all that stuff over to you, after this meeting. So you have
it should go to the whole committee when the whole committee is ready.
I'll send it to everybody, but
everybody should see it.
But the floor plans, all that information is there, and yeah, it's just historical data that we've had. So anyways, so the project description, and a lot of this came from, honestly, the RFP for our services that Bill and whoever else on this committee helped write. So I kept a lot of that the same. The project budget here, I just want to make, this is where it changed. So the project budget is the $15.9 million. That hasn't changed. What we don't share with architects typically are the contingency values and the fees and expenses values. Because that's not necessarily, I don't want to say it's their business, but they don't necessarily need to know what that is. Although again, if they do a little bit of research, I can figure it out. What's important for them, and it's one of the appendices, is the designer control budget. So the $13,070,100, that is the number that they're going to be given to design towards, and that's building and furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So
Anne has her hand up.
yeah,
Do you want to, and so does Joe Paradiso. Anne, you were first.
Okay, the last sentence, I'm wondering if if it needs to read, the selected architect will be responsible for designing the building and furnishings within these budget parameters.
sure.
Thanks.
No problem. No problem. Done. Joe?
My question, was it in the intent that furniture is included in the budget? I guess I wasn't clear on that, or maybe it is.
It is. So the 13 million includes the building construction of 8.5, the related construction of 2.03, the FF&E and the escalation. All of that equals the 13,070.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so they are responsible for designing a building that is
Inclusive of furniture within that budget.
inclusive, all within $13 million.
Furniture, fixtures.
Right.
Okay.
And that's important because the contract's going to say, if for some reason during the schematic design phase, their building is estimated at $18 million, that they are responsible at their own cost to bring it back to $13 million. Unless you all decide that you want to come up with $5 million more and
Well, that's actually, that was going to be my comment. This budget is exclusive of grants, current grants and or future grants, and that somehow that should, I'd like to have that incorporated in there, because there may be future grants, and we also have a $4 million grant that I probably would need some wording from the Board of Selectmen if we wanted to include that. But there is a path to get to that $4 million if at somewhere near the end or somewhere at the, at somewhere in the process, it was deemed that those funds might be necessary.
But Joe, Al, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think the additional grant money was going to go on top of the $15.9 million. I think that grant money was going to be used to offset the town costs embedded in the $15.9 million.
I think, Mark, both you and Joe are correct in your comments. The original intent, Mark, was certainly as you suggested, but as we've learned more and more about some of these grants, there may be, the selectmen may have the option at some future point to treat that $4 million differently.
Okay.
It may be a slim chance, but it's there, and I think it's proper to include that possibility as we're developing this contract language.
Yeah, and also potentially future grants. I mean, the 4 million might be the thing that brings down the cost to the taxpayers, but there may be several other million out there that we want to pursue, and we can request that be added to versus subtracted from, and that would just be a process between some of the boards, I believe. But
Okay. I added a line to reflect that. That's good to know, Al. Thank you.
And Mark, when we chose Colliers as for the OPM,
Yep.
there was a segment of your company that is charged with finding grants for projects like this.
Correct.
And certainly we'd like to put that in here to hold your feet to the fire, to be sure that you're going to be living up to that promise.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah,
you
again,
personally,
I just want to make sure that again, we're talking the same thing. And again, my interpretation, and Al corrected it, was the $15.9 million could be $20 million if you got additional grants. And that's important to know, because if the designers come back with a building that's cost more money, but you have additional funds to cover that, then we're good.
And would it be possible to put that as part somehow, to put that, this is the 15 million, well, the 13 million dollar design, and yeah, we have these other ideas that would bring it to, I don't know, 15 million, 16 million. And then we would know the, sort of the upcharge and what we were getting for that extra money. Is that something you can put in? Is that word language you can put in?
Well, do we know how much money is available right now? Do we know for sure that's $4, $5, $6 million?
No, we don't.
Okay.
Because
Yeah,
it would, the 4 million from conversations with Alan and other people in the building, it has to go through Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance. And that's why it's a slim, that makes it slimmer than just going through the Board of Selectmen. But it's not totally, it wouldn't be totally impossible under some set of circumstances that we can't foresee that a portion of that $4 million and or future grants might be used to finance this project.
Do you know, Al, like up to what it could be? Could there be up to an additional $2, $3, $4 million?
I don't think we know, Mark.
Okay.
I'm thinking of the additional grants. Perhaps some of them would be enhancing the building beyond what we had originally contemplated.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not supplemental, they're not supplanting, they're enhancing.
Yeah.
And so I have no idea what the upper limit is. And sometime soon, I think this committee should be presented with a listing of the possible grants that we might go chasing after. And I think then we'll maybe have a better idea.
Okay.
Mark, you probably understand better than any of us all the possible grants that we might possibly be able to go after.
Yeah, and that's true. And again, my point is there's grants to offset town costs, and then there's grants to augment, budgets. So
But for an RFP process, though, is it a little too loosey-goosey? Do you want to be more conservative and hold the architects to a closer number? Or do you want to give them a range as plus or minus 25%? Because that's what we're saying here.
I think, Joe, for the purpose, unless we have an actual number, they're proposing on a $15.9 million total project budget and a $13 million designer budget. Because again, unless it's known what the value is, it could be $100,000, which is nothing. If it's $100,000, that's not much. If it's $5 million, that's significant.
Yeah, 15 versus 12 versus 20 is quite a big swing. So do you want to say approximately 15 million or $15.9 million budget as opposed to telling them 20? Because it'll be easier to add 4 million on top of the 15 than reel it back from 20 back to 15. And then
I agree.
that could change our RFP responses.
Yeah, I agree that putting a number in there, but including a statement that says that that this could be enhanced. This value could be enhanced by future grants would be would be all that I would have that I would propose. That putting a
Now
number
putting
in
numbers to it.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
there some, Al, is there some value to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance decision-making in knowing what some of those additional funds would go towards in their votes? If they said, hey, we want to change it to additive as opposed to reductive in cost because it buys us X, Y, and Z, would that be helpful?
I think it's just premature. I think your elected officials would react much better to a known grant award than trying to deal with something theoretical, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
Well, I guess I'm trying to get clarity. The $4 million that we have now, we said there's a slim chance it could be changed to an additive grant as opposed to reductive.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a slim chance. I'd say I'd describe it as a narrow path. There is a definite path. The path is quite narrow, but it isn't like there's no like probability to it. It would be finding that narrow path.
So to walk that narrow path, would any services that the architect can provide be beneficial to helping make that decision one way or another. And that's the only reason I'm asking it in this context. If we want them to provide some guidance, hey, if you do this, this is the building you get. If you do this, this is the building you get, type of attitude.
I mean, they'll work with the town as these grant opportunities are unfolding. So, you know, if through our research, we find that there's additional grants that require the building to, I don't know, you know, have more landscaping, more vegetation, more something, right? That's adding scope, right? You know, and we see that you can get a $500,000. Okay, then they'll work with you to add that $500,000 worth of scope to the, you know, to the project or whatever that is, you'll receive the grant for. You know, one of the things that I have to do is I just have to make sure that as we're adding dollars to the budget, you know, additive, if it's going to impact their fees, right? So, you know, their fees are going to be based upon a, you know, a $13 million design and control budget. That becomes $18 million. Our job is to make sure that if there's going to be additional costs, that's being realized in the project budget, not just the construction cost. You know, there's going to be a soft cost component to this, and that's what our job is, to manage that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Good point.
And after this meeting, we all go out and buy Powerballs, right? Okay.
Yeah, right. That's right. Okay. So I added some language when I reissue this. Feel free to, you know, add additional commentary to this. Joe, do you have another question, or is that the same hand?
That was
raised
the same thing.
before?
Just what, oh, Joe Paradiso's got your hand up.
Yeah, Joe Paradiso. Are you good?
No, I just didn't pull my hand down.
Gotcha. You're like that kid in class the whole time.
Yeah.
All right. The next section under project estimates. Again, during the course of design, we're going to want the architect to provide an estimate, and then we're going to get a second estimate. And this is a management process that we've been using for 26 years, that during the course of the three phases of design, the end of schematic design, the end of design development, the end, and some point during the CD phase, construction documentation, it's always good to have two estimates. And what we ask the architect is to provide an estimate, and then we'll either get an independent estimator, or if we hire a construction manager, they'll do an estimate, and we'll have two estimates side by side. It's a whole reconciliation process, and it just generally leads to a higher level of comfort as where the project stands financially.
And when is that project estimate due? Is that after there's an award, or is this now due before the, you know, before right at the RFP?
So they're not going to submit anything right now for an estimate. What we're saying is they have to provide an estimate. And let me just show you on my screen. I'll share my screen for a second. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
So here's the design phase that we're proposing, January through November. These light blue periods is when we're going to want to see estimates from the designer and our second estimator. So what all that statement is saying is, make sure that in your fee, you carry a cost estimate 3 times. One in March, one in June. And by the way, this document will be shared with the architects as part of the RFP. So they'll see exactly, you know, when we're going to do what we're going to do.
So Mark, are you looking for that cost estimate sort of along with like a 30, 60, 90% design review, or is it just checkpoints during that design process?
Yeah, so at the end of schematic design, Joe, when we've got, you know, some concept of a drawings and specs, we're going to say, okay, give us an estimate. How much do you think what you just prepared after the first 3 months of design is going to cost? And then we're going to go through an entire process of reviewing estimates and value engineering. And then this committee will charge the project team, okay, move forward now with the project now that we're on budget. And then 3 months later, we're going to have a more detailed set of drawings and specs, and we're going to repeat it again.
Yep.
And then we're going to do that. And then 3 or 4 months later, we're going to repeat it again, right before we go to bid, so that we have, you know, bid certainty, or as much as you can have bid certainty in these times, that the bids will come in on budget.
Thank you.
So anyways, a lot of architects don't like to have that responsibility. They'd rather have somebody else be responsible, but we've always charged them with being responsible for estimating their design. All right, the next section just talks about the schedule. And again, I shared with you the project schedule, so they're going to get that, as well as, the dates here for the selection process, which will be changed based upon where we are today.
Mark, I'd like to talk about this
Sure.
in more detail. It seems a bit rushed. And I was wondering why we did the combination instead of the two-stage. I was talking to Graham today, and the school did it like, they did a two-step process. And I was wondering why, and matter of fact, when I read some of the verbiage in the back, it sounded more like a two-step process. But why put these together and then only have 2 weeks to respond for the architects to respond?
So this is it's a much simpler project, Joe, than the school project is. That's a far more complicated package. And the school grant process requires a two-step process, because the OSCGNR, the funding source for the state, or for the town from the state, says you can't choose an architect from any more than 4. So you have to go through a two-step process. This doesn't require that. We're not getting, the money from the Office of School Construction Grant. So in an effort to stay on the schedule that was in our proposal, our RFP, it kind of forced our hand into doing a blended RFQ RFP process. It's not uncommon. We've done it before for municipality type projects, so it's not the first time, nor the last time we'll do it. But that's why we didn't do it. I mean, again, the schools, you have to do a two-step process. You don't have to here. And again, we tried to get on the schedule that that Bill issued in our RFP to have designers on board by January 1st.
Yeah, I think that now that we're, as we look into it, I don't think we have to hold that January 1st date as unmutable. That that's a date that can be changed.
Sure.
But it just sounds, especially it sounds like, from what little bit I know, that 2 weeks to put all this together, including a cost estimate, is too short of time to get.
Well, it's not. They're not putting together a cost estimate, Joe. They're not. It's what we're saying is that they have to have an estimator on their team, but there's no estimate. And there's, but I hear you. I mean, again, we've issued RFPs in the past with 2-week turnaround. It's not monumental, but again, I'm willing to change this if you all want to extend it out and have the design start later in 2023. I can do that.
I don't know, Joe, what is the advantage that we would gain from extending? You think we're going to get higher quality quotes, or we'll get a larger number? What are you thinking?
I would think that if an architectural firm looked at this and said they had, and they haven't been involved in it. Now, obviously, some of the people who have been involved in this from the beginning can meet these deadlines. They could probably meet a 3-day deadline. But I'm not sure. I'm not seeing where it says qualifications and fee proposals do. So that's just their fee, as opposed to the cost of the build. Is that what?
This is just what they're going to charge the town of Madison to be the architect for this project.
Okay. And where do we look at their design ideas?
That'll come up during the presentations and the interviews. Once they get shortlisted, they're notified that they've got the qualifications, and we know what their general fee is going to be. You're going to choose the 3 or 4 that you want to interview. That's when you'll see You might see some concepts, you know, with the submissions, but again, we're not really looking for a lot of concepts here. We're just looking for where have you done community centers in the past? And given the fact that it's a $13 million designer control budget, what would you charge us to deliver a design and a architectural engineering service for this type of a project? Honestly, that's all they need to put together a fee.
Yeah, AJ, what I was thinking was that the short time frame significantly favors the people who have been already involved in this in the project, or people that have been dealing with Colliers and talking to them, as opposed to an independent or someone outside of that circle who might be interested but be turned off by the 2-week time frame.
Yeah, I agree with that too, Joe. I'm just saying, if this supposes we publish this today, which we're obviously not doing, and if we take into account the holidays, it probably just does make more sense to give them a bit more time to compile their responses. Maybe 4 weeks, maybe 3 weeks.
Or move it to a 2-step process, which I guess I don't see, if listening to you, Mark, I don't see that much difference between the 2-step process and the which gives us a little more information up front, and the and trying to do a combined.
It'll just add a month to the selection process.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, with holidays, we're probably not going to wind up doing interviews until early January, by the time we get this thing published.
And Mark, could you maybe put a couple of alternate schedules ready for next week? 2-step process, single step, the way you have it, taking into account the holidays and the any holiday periods, and just allowing more time to get maybe get a credible response, as opposed to a partial response and then making a decision, narrowing it down to 4, without any real design concepts.
Some firms aren't going to do designs because they'll say, I haven't met with anybody and I don't know what you're going to want for a design. Some will put some concepts together, but you'd be surprised at how little information will come, because they'll argue that I haven't met with anybody from the town and I'm not sure why I want to put a
Then
design
maybe
together.
we won't get design concepts, but
Yeah.
we still may be able to attract a wider list of people who are interested than with a schedule that allows them more time to prepare.
I can definitely do that. How important is past experience going to be?
I guess I don't know.
I mean,
Anybody want to answer that question?
You were saying past
Oh, go ahead, AJ.
Just wanted to get a clarifying question. By past experience, you mean past experience designing community centers
yeah.
like this? Okay. Go ahead, Joe.
Now, I was going to say, and I think from the past interviews we did looking for the project manager, I felt it was great to get people with little experience, a lot of experience, and different experiences. So I thought it helped us make a better decision. So I'd like to see everyone throw their hat in the ring.
So my point is, if we go to a 2-step, what's going to drive somebody, what's going to get them past the first qualifications to the second qualifications? Is it past performance, or is it just, because usually when you do a 2-step, what makes you qualified to be the architect or the OPM or the CM or whoever, or the hazmat consultant? It's having experience with that type of a project, that type of a building.
Right. So you're saying we're not going to see any designs. So the only things we're going to have to go off of is what they've done in the past. And
Right.
Let me. I had an interesting perspective when we hired the OPM, when we hired you guys, Mark.
Yeah.
That there was a lot of we had a lot of materials on everybody, including resumes and bios and hardly any of that was actually used in the selection process. And what was really used were the interviews. And the interviews were based on the ability of the people who gave the presentations and gave the presentations. We chose them. We chose people by the presentations, and then we chose the finalists from the interviews. And that was my perspective. And I actually missed one of the interview processes. So does anybody have any? Would anybody disagree with that, or is that kind of that is kind of the way it went?
I feel like we used a lot of different information, not just the interviews. I think we all did a lot of research based on the responses to the RFPs. We looked online at these companies. So I think we looked at a lot of things other than the interviews.
Eileen brings up a good point. We've only been talking about the ability of the architects to put a credible package together, but we need some time too. 2 weeks may be too short for us to go through that part of the process, that much of the process in just 2 weeks.
One other thing that I think of is how much are we pushing this project down the road, and how important to us is it that we finish it on time overall? Because if we're right at the beginning and we're already pushing things off, I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't give them an extra week. I'm just saying we need to think about how that's going to have a ripple effect throughout the entire project.
Eileen, I'll say this. I do think that there is flexibility in the schedule. Again, this schedule is based upon the schedule that was presented to us in the RFP that we responded to. I do think you could probably shorten the construction duration and still finish on time if you extended the designer selection and just slid the design period a month or two. I do think that but I was being respectful of the schedule that was prepared in our RFP that might have come out of this committee. And I didn't want you to see me making changes to something that maybe was born from this committee originally. But my opinion, Eileen, is you can definitely add time to this and not lose the end date.
And I don't think the end date for this project is as critical as it is for, say, a school, because you've got,
Right.
classrooms and kids and things like that. I think the design really needs to meet what the community wants it to be. And I think that that's so critical for a positive experience here. And I think it's going to take some information from our ad hoc committee and surveys that they're going to be doing and things like that to, help us with the finalization of the design. So I'd rather push it off a week or two, even a month, or even a couple of months if it takes that long to ensure that the community is going to be happy with the end result, is my thought process.
Yeah, I would say that my concern too with the time is just that shorter window, whether we do one step, two step, is we may eliminate some people from being able to respond that actually want to do the job. And the 1 or 2 weeks over November, December timeframe, I don't think it's going to impact the project very much, in my opinion.
Yeah, I guess I'm not as in agreement that we need to split it into two. That seems overly, seems like a lot of extra process for maybe not a lot of benefit, but maybe extending these periods that we're talking about may give us enough comfort with the people that come in and the quality.
So I could do this. I could take the one step process we have now and elongate some of the duration so you have 3 or 4 weeks to respond and really get us past the holidays where the interviews are in January versus December. I could also create a schedule that shows just the 2-step and what that would look like. From a timing perspective. Honestly, it isn't that difficult for us to produce those schedules. And maybe AJ, you're right. Maybe giving the designers 4 weeks to respond versus 2 weeks to respond. And then this committee, 2 weeks to review documents versus 1 week, and then interviews, 3 weeks after selection. So they have more time to prepare a presentation. Maybe that gives you ultimately what you want.
And you've been silent. I know you deal with the the money a lot. Do you see these, schedules? Are they, does what we're talking about seem reasonable to you?
So I agree with the idea of extending both the time for the applicants to prepare their responses, especially given the holidays, but also with the extension of the time we have to review so that we can actually be thoughtful and not feel rushed.
So let me do that. I'll add a two-step process. I'll update the schedule to reflect longer periods for both designers to prepare, committee to review, and then the next meeting you can make a decision which one you want to go with. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
Oh, no problem. All right, let's see. So that was the schedule. The next section, we have project delivery method. Again, it has not been decided by the committee whether this is to be a construction manager or general contractor delivery. Honestly, it doesn't really change the services too much, other than the fact that if we have early bid packages and now the designers have to put together, 2 sets of bid specs. But whether it's a CM or a GC doesn't really matter. And for the purposes of this, we assume the CM, but that could change and it wouldn't have an impact on their services, but we figured we just let them know. The next section is just special requirements that they're going to be required to attend all building committee meetings and town presentations, just so that there's no question as to when we ask them to go to the Board of Selectmen and say, hey, give an update to the Board of Finance, the garden club, whoever you want to get out in front of. We let the designers know that they're going to have to be there with us, giving those presentations.
Mark, I'd like to go back to one sentence above the special requirements.
Yeah.
And I'll speak, and Dave, I don't know if Dave Spurley is still listening, but I'll add this for Dave Spelling. The design committee responsible for developing a plan that preserves the operations of the fields, parking lots, and playgrounds. The field, mentioning the fields are like the key word for some people.
Yes, sir. You're correct. Yep. AJ, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a quick question on the special requirements. I know for the school, sounds like they're doing some public meetings. Would that, for this community center project, do we feel like that's something we want the architecture firm to do for this as well? Or is that something that you would facilitate? The architecture firm would just provide documents for, or we're not doing that at all? I guess I'm unclear on.
Let me answer the last question. We are planning to do that. It would be in conjunction to some extent with Bill Stableford's committee. And they may actually, in terms of community interface, they may lead and we would follow. So, but it would be a joint. And we did, and Bill and I talked about maybe that we won't do that until we have something from an architect that has some design on it. But that's a conversation outside of what we've talked about so far. And Mark, you weren't involved in that, so I'll shut up and let you answer AJ's question in the way you might have answered it.
Yeah, no, I think what we're saying here, AJ, is that if this committee wanted to do a public information session, we're going to obviously be a part of it. We're going to be facilitate, the development of the presentation. We just want them to know that they're going to be part of that. We're going to want them to develop plans and elevations and be there to speak to any, architecture related questions or issues that come up. So when we say the architect will be responsible to require and attend all community center building committee meetings and periodically make presentations to the town of Madison, various committees, again, Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, maybe Board of Ed, maybe the senior community committee, if there's such a thing, and then attend and various informational meetings for the public. We don't know if you're going to want to do that, but if you are, don't come at us with an ad service because we're making you come to a meeting.
Right. Okay.
And that's a lot of this, by the way, everybody, is because we don't want to see those ad services come through. It's like because you'd have to come to you and say, okay, do you want to approve, $2,000 to have your architect come to your public information session? And after a while, you're like, why are they charging us for this? Because you'd be amazed that AIA contracts are pretty quiet about things like that. And we've been doing this for 26 years. We've seen enough of these ad services, and we know you're going to want them to do it. You're going to want them to come to these meetings. So we tell them, build in your fee while it's competitive, doing all of this stuff.
Mark, I'd like to extend AJ's question a little further.
Sure.
What services, if any, will the architect be providing the advisory committee?
Well, providing them, other
Yeah.
than being a receptive ear to what they're bringing to the project. It'd be no different now than what I'm doing with the advisory committee. I'm not sitting at those meetings, but the committee's going to come to you all and to the project team with thoughts and ideas. And if they want something within this building that you're all in agreement with, if it falls within the budget parameters, they'll provide it. If they want to do something that goes above the budget parameters, that could potentially lead to an ad service. Like, for example, let's say the advisory committee comes and says, we want to have rooftop gardens, right? So Dave, Bill, and I walked up to the roof, right? And it's a really cool space up there. It really is. If you haven't been up to that little cupola conference area up there, it is a really cool little space, right? But it's unoccupiable because you can't get up there without, non-code compliant stairs. There's no elevator, right? And if you're making this thing code compliant, you would have to make sure everybody can get up there. But let's say the advisory committee says, we want to really explore and have rooftop gardens or rooftop patio or rooftop something up there. Well, that's going to lead to significant design work to be able to do that. And if the design team says, okay, it's going to cost you, the committee, $100,000 for us to design that, you're going to have to say yes to that.
And not to mention the $1 million it would take to actually have
All of it, yeah, all of the other costs. But my point is, the advisory committee says we want to do this. They're not going to do anything, Al, unless this committee says, yes, we want you to do that.
So let
Especially
me work
without
through what I think is maybe a practical example. There's been a lot of talk about lighting and sound in the theater. And let's say the design committee comes forward and says, we've listened to the public, and there's two different options we think the lighting should be in the theater. One is at, an A option level, and the other's at a B option level. They bring that information to this committee here tonight. How does that get processed?
If this committee wants to see both options explored, right? And what ultimately is going to lead to the decision, 99% of the time is, what is it going to cost? Option A is $50,000. Option B is $300,000. Now, if option B falls within the $13.07 million and you get everything else that you like, and this committee says, yeah, let's do that, then it's in. If that $300,000 puts us at $14.2 million, and now you're talking, okay, do we need to get back to the 13.7, or do we have additional, you're going to make the decision as to whether or not you want option A or option B. And if it's option B, right, well, part of that price tag may be additional lighting consultant services, right? Because now you're designing a $300,000 lighting system versus something that's $50,000. So all of that will be part of the equation for you to make a decision on whether or not you want to accept it or not accept it.
Or what else we might cut from the project as a trade-off and communicate that back to the design team. Like, you can have this, but you can't have a kitchen, or vice versa. It's trade-offs.
Good point, Joe. If you say, you know what, we're going to get rid of the commercial kitchen on the lower level. Okay, don't need the kitchen consultant anymore. But yeah, ultimately it'll be your decision. Nobody's doing anything, Al, from the advisory committee, unless it comes from this committee. And I think Joe and I had this conversation, and I think Dave might have been there, maybe you, Al. We report to this committee, not to the advisory committee.
I'm trying to make sure everybody understands that.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Mark, I got one quick question for you.
Yeah, Dave.
In regard to the architects, we know when you brought up their scope and it kind of piqued my interest on that. What language in their contract is listed where what is a change order, what's an add, right, from their design? Because the lighting is a good example you brought up, right? So if you wanted to change the lighting, they got to put some effort into it. They got to perform an estimate, something they wouldn't have typically done, right? Is that actually an extra, or how do they quote that? Change orders or?
No, so there's going to be a couple of areas where it is going to be very clear what is in their scope of work. So I'm going to share my screen again, if you don't mind. And this is going to be another exhibit or appendix to the document that we're going to issue at some point. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this essentially takes the $15.9 million budget, keeps in the values, the construction costs, the FF&E costs, and says, here's your $13.07 million that you're responsible for. Everything with an asterisk in here, whether it's the scope of work within the building or the consultants that are going to be required by the architect, is noted in this document, in addition to the contract, Dave. So Dave, I don't know if you can see this because you think you said you're in your car. So what we're saying is architectural costs, obviously, structural engineering, mechanical engineering, civil engineering, landscape, interior, code, lighting, acoustical, signage, sustainability, AV, computer information technology. All of those consultants fall under the architect's responsibility. So they need to carry those consultants as part of their basic services. Green building consultant, anything that from a sustainability perspective, site survey.
Yeah, but they're carrying them as a lump sum though, right, Mark?
Well, I don't know how they're carrying it, but it's going to be so when they submit a fee of, I don't know, for round number purposes, let's say $1 million, it will include all of these consultants.
No, agreed. So let's just say, maybe another example is, let's just say that the other committee comes back and say, hey, we want to knock out a wall and make one of the rooms twice as big, right? For some reason.
Yep.
So now they're going to bring in a structural engineer to look at the wall and see if it can come out and what changes you need to do.
Yep.
Right. If that wasn't originally in what they were designing, let's just say we're 3 months into this, that's still not an extra.
No, because as long as it's still part of the, the $12.370 million, which is your budget for your building. No, that's not an
Okay, because I was starting to think, if they have, if they're subbing out their structural engineer, right, they're going to get an estimate based on what they would perceive to be their design, right?
Yep.
It's going to be 100 hours of structural engineering services or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it just seems like after that 100 hours, they're going to try to come after us for extras. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, they won't, Dave, until it's like, if it's during construction, then it might be different. But during early design, it won't, because there's still a lot to be determined. We have no idea what the selected architect is going to propose for a concept within $12.3 million to get this building up to snuff. We have no idea. There may be a fair amount of demolition, there may be limited demolition, but it'll ebb and flow early on to the point where it's going to be move a wall here, take out a wall here, blah blah blah. That's covered. It'll only become an issue if it comes up in construction, that there's a real unforeseen condition that requires the structural engineer to come back out and look at something, or this committee says, as a betterment, we want to take those classrooms and do something different.
I have a question about what's not included.
Okay.
Commissioning and core and shell validation. Just quick, is that under Colliers, or is that going to be a separate RFP, or does the town perform that?
Yeah, building commissioning.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is not something that a service that we're providing. We can. I mean, it's a service that we do provide, but if the town wants a building commissioner, it would be a separate RFP process and selection. We have
Okay.
a value, by the way, in our budget for commissioning. Doesn't mean that you have to do commissioning, but it's something that's there.
Okay.
By the way, everything that says with owner, we have a value for that in our budget.
Yeah, I just wonder, some things say, with owner may fall into Colliers. Some things say with owner may not fall onto Colliers. That's
Well,
what I'm-
again, what this is saying, Joe, is that it's not with the architect. It's,
Yeah.
yes, it's with, obviously, the project management with Colliers, but from a budgetary perspective, we say it's by owner, not by the architect. Or if it's not applicable, like referendum services, that's not applicable. We're past that phase. Permitting not included. The town doesn't typically charge itself permit fees. So. All right. I don't know how we got into that tangent, but okay. So just to continue through the document, then we talk about what we're looking for in terms of scope of services, comprehensive. We want this to be comprehensive. This is not high level. We do include in this section, Dave, that we're expecting people to have experience and expertise with civil, landscape, geotechnical, other estimating, code research, lighting. It's repeated multiple times. Geothermal design is included here because we know that geothermal design is something that the town wanted for this building. So that's noted here. We talk about it being, meeting codes, life safety codes, state building codes, you name it. High performance building requirements are required. It just talks about just the level of services we're looking for. Other than the next section is speak
Before
to.
you move on, Mark, Anne, you had your hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ann.
Yes, I'm wondering in that second paragraph, if we need to specify that it's the current Connecticut state building codes.
The community center shall be designed to the current state building and life safety codes as required by state law.
Yeah,
So what would you want to change to that, Ann?
specify that it's Connecticut state law.
Sure, we can add that. Okay. Other questions about that section? Okay, and again, the next several sections speak to the survey, the geotechnical, the traffic analysis, the phase 1, phase 2 site assessment. That the architect will not be responsible for preparing the phase 1 or phase 2. They're not responsible for the hazmat services. We do talk about the architect being responsible for preparing and submitting permit documents for Connecticut Deep general permit. Fees paid by the town.
Just out of curiosity, Mark, the geotechnical borings, what if that goes outside the project? If the borings and the pits are now a separate project, or the whole geothermal design is a separate project?
Well, geothermal, the geotechnical is different than geothermal. The geotechnical, Joe, is more of the if there was going to be an addition to the building or anywhere where you're putting in a new foundation, they would need to do the geotechnical borings to make sure that what you have for soil density, soil capacity,
Okay, got it.
soil bearing, essentially.
So that's where the elevator is going to go.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
question on the geotechnical borings. Do we also want to include in there anything about septic? Are we going to assess septic to make sure that whatever the occupancy of the building is, the existing system is capable of supporting it? One, it's old, and two, is the occupancy the same?
Yeah, I've got to see. That's a good point, Joe, because I know we talked about that. I don't know if it's referenced somewhere else. Let me make a note here, and then I'll confirm where that should go.
Sure. Another quick question on everyone mentioned parking earlier on traffic analysis. That's section D.
Yep.
You want to expand that? I'll throw it out to the team. Do we want to see a traffic study and a parking study to, again, giving occupancy? Can existing parking hold the building? Does it need to change? Are there any curb cuts necessary? How does that affect traffic? So a traffic and parking study. Thinking about deliveries to the building and everything else. So let me ask this, is it traffic analysis just of the roads? And traffic coming into the building?
Yeah, this, Joe, is specifically stating that they're responsible for anything that has to go in front of OSTA, Office of State Traffic Administration. But in terms
That
of,
would just be the roads.
yeah, that's just the roads. Yeah, whatever traffic impacts there are, that they're responsible for that service.
Yeah, I mean, usually parking shakes out in the design, but I don't know
Yeah.
if we can specify it out. Or is it not a concern because of the parking throughout?
Yeah, usually, the town's gonna dictate what they have for parking with the zoning regs, mandate what they're gonna need for parking. Now, obviously, we have parking in front of the building already that, I don't think is gonna go anywhere. And I don't want to bring up the prior study, but they did do a traffic or parking. I don't know if you saw the parking.
Did not.
Yeah, there was a site plan developed that showed, I forget the number of parking spaces, but it was in the presentation.
It's like 92 parking spaces. It wasn't a whole lot.
Yeah,
That's
between
needed.
existing
Based on the
and
community center?
what's that, Joe?
No, because it's a school versus a community center, going to be two different occupancies.
Correct. Yeah,
Going
yeah,
to require a different amount of parking. So did the prior study say, given a community center, existing parking is enough? If
No,
so, big
no.
deal.
It was definitely not enough.
Definitely not enough.
No, yeah. I want to say existing was 40 and we're adding 50 additional spots. Yeah, there was something along those, but I think Joe's right. There's a lot, 90 something spots that were going to be made available, but that was the previous study. But yeah, they'll have to do a parking analysis as part of their base services. That's pretty standard.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Then we talk about the agreements that will be included as part of the process. And again, the reason we like to issue the contracts is there is some language in there that is intended to protect the town, to protect you, the owner, the client. That would be more difficult to get through if the contract is proposed after the selection. Again, it's a process we've been using for 25 years. We talk about working group meetings during the project. And then we just go through the selection process. And again, this will change if we go to a two-step process. If we go to an RFQ followed by an RFP, this will look different. But we talk about it, reviewing qualifications, evaluating fees, the interview process. Those are really the three pillars that are generally used in selecting, a designer. We talk about under the presentation and interview, what is typically important for clients. So I would pay close attention to that. Yeah, Ann?
Sorry to be a pest.
No, not at all, please.
Okay, so in the review process, do we need to take out the sentence that says proposals are being requested from 4 firms?
Yes. Yes. Well, I'm going to highlight that because it's going to, well, I have to highlight that because it's going to depend if this is an RFQ P, it would be obviously more than 4 firms. Yeah, that will be changed in some capacity, Ann.
Thanks.
Yep. So back to the presentation and interview, again, this is what generally is important to clients about, so pay attention to this one. Back to Joe, you were saying, what led to your decision-making process for the project management firm. A lot of it's chemistry, some specific ideas and thoughts, sensitivity to Madison, clarity and method of presentation, comments on budget, cost control, construction, site knowledge, creativity, sensitivity. Those are some things that are typically important for these types of projects that we like to include?
Can we maybe punt this one till next meeting and task everyone with looking specifically at this, at those bullet points and evaluating if those are good or not good and bringing additional ones to the table, rather than try to discuss them all here. I know that we had for the OPM contract, we had a number of those points that we had to evaluate, specific evaluation points. And the number of type A people among us who listed everyone out and made a comment on each. And so having the right ones there will help all of us type A people do that again and make it productive and not be an exercise in not be an exercise in futility. So if everyone could, if that's a to-do for everyone to look at section B and look at what we really think would be the criteria we're going to be try to determine what the criteria are that we're going to be using or that are important to us. And Mark, is this essentially your list, or did you get this from somewhere, like from a previous project?
Yeah, this is one.
Because your input would be important to us too.
Yeah, this is something, Joe, that we typically have in this document. It's one that's been used time and time again, but it doesn't mean that it can't change. We can add or edit any of these bullets. It was issued to give you something to react to.
Okay.
Like, yep, this looks good, or no, I would rather see something about this or about that.
Mark, I like your list. Is it, does the committee have to demonstrate when it makes its final decision that it used only these criteria?
I'm sorry, I was just looking at, I saw a chat message from Joan. I don't know if she was trying to say something or. So I'm sorry, Al, what was the question
Yeah,
again?
Mark, I'm trying to get at, is the committee restricted to only using
No.
the listed criteria?
No, not at all.
Okay.
These are just generally, likely to be considered, it says, but there's no auditing of anybody about any of this.
For the sake of time, can we say including but not limited to, and then work out our final list in parallel to this going out?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to issue this until I get feedback from everybody, so we can change this. But yeah, I can, again, the way it reads right now is the following criteria not listed in priority order are likely to be considered in evaluating and selecting the design team. So it just says are likely to be considered. It doesn't say is or in. It kind of keeps it loosey.
So do we need to have this, Joe? Do you want to have this nailed down, like specifically before we get the RFP out, or?
I would like to have it. I'd like the RFP to go out as soon as possible after next week's meeting. And I would not deliberately put anything in here that would delay it past that time. So if we feel that more than a week's time is necessary to develop them, I suppose that it wouldn't hurt us to delay a few days, but it seems as though a week would be enough time to put together a list. And I don't know if it's going to, I don't know how far it's going to deviate from what's here, because there's another evaluation criteria. There's presentation and interview, and then there's evaluation criteria in part C. So I think those two go together. The first is the interview, and the second is the criteria for the proposal. So there are two different sets there. I know I'm jumping ahead of you, Mark, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Nope.
And both of those are important. And I agree, the chance of that, anybody ever looking at it, are about slim and none. And the only time that I've ever seen is if you have a disgruntled bidder who said there was something in the selection process that favored a particular firm or supplier over others. And then you'd have to go into legal issues, and I don't want to go there at all. But that's like, that's less than slim enough.
I guess that was my point. Like, since it says not listed in priority or likely to be considered, do we really need to be exhaustive?
No,
Do we really need, in parallel, maybe we can figure out what our criteria are going to be. But in this opportunity, maybe it's better to say less than more,
Okay,
just a, devil's advocate.
the first set is what we want to see in the interview. The second set is how we're going to evaluate them, their proposal. Do I got that right, Mark?
yeah, typically, right? It's okay,
Yeah.
Here's who we saw for teams presenting. And then when we're making a decision, right, we're gonna look at everything. We're gonna consider the fees, the experience, how you performed with that experience. And this is an interesting, people have asked me, why do we have past performance versus experience? Well, because what if the past performance was bad? They did a bad job, on the last 4 jobs that they did. That would be important to know. I took out the reference to the points, by the way, because I don't know if we need to do a point system.
Yeah, I had that.
Yeah.
Because they asked me what that was.
Yeah. So what we typically do, Joe and Joe, for those is sometimes we'll give you a form and you rank, how they fared on a scale of, 1 to 15, 15 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. And then you plug in numbers and then you do math and it spits out the highest ranking firm is ABC versus, DEF. But that gets too complicated, I think.
Yeah, that's known as a false precision.
Yeah.
That there really is a difference between
Right.
61 and 59 points. And you certainly should choose the 61.1 because they have much higher points than 59.
Yeah.
But you probably weren't familiar with this, Mark, but we used a forced ranking system as opposed to a point system. So
Yeah.
that was the. It's
So again,
easier to say this guy's the best, this guy's the worst. Let's talk about who's in the middle.
Yeah. Well, again, has anybody gone through the selection before for architects? I mean, it's not too dissimilar for project managers, but who do you like? Who can you see yourself working with for the next, I don't know, 2 years, 2.5 years? Are they worth the fee? I mean, some would say yes, some would say no. Somebody referenced, I think it was Eileen, you talked about doing research and checking, experiences and references, maybe, all that stuff factors in some capacity. The fees, the experience, the performance, all of that stuff will be known before the interview. And then it's the interview itself. And then it's like, okay, having known all of that, and let's assume you interview the top 3 or 4 firms that have the best experiences and they perform the best. And you like their team and their approach. And that just comes down to personality and chemistry.
Yeah, it does sort of tend to get a little subjective there at the end.
Oh, it totally does, Ann, totally does. And this is something else to keep in mind, right? And again, I'll follow your lead, right? Because I work for you. But some people would say, don't show me the fees until after the interviews. Because, you may love, architect A, but when you open up fees and you present the fees and say, okay, they are the highest of the 4 firms by 25%, it may alter your opinion versus some people will look at the fees early on and not even listen to any of the other discussions. I'm going to go to the low fee. And we try and hold the fees back and let that be part of the conversation, but not until after you've heard from all the firms.
Joe, I think what you were proposing, looking at the agenda, is that the same, ranked choice voting, the same way we chose the OPM is the same way we choose architect. Right.
I would propose that. I think that's it worked well. It not only worked well in choosing, it worked well in bringing out discussions. I mean,
I
there was a
agree.
lot of good dialogue among all the members over the time that we had allotted to pick. And that dialogue really helped us make the decision. In the end, it was the dialogue that made the decision, and how we felt as a group, and how we thought who we could work as a group. And Mark, you obviously came out on top of that one. So
Agreed.
you should like that process, by the way.
I wasn't gonna say that, Joe, but whatever you did, worked perfectly well.
Hey, Mark, I just got one quick comment.
Yeah, Dave.
On this paragraph, just for consistency purposes, we're using town and owner kind of here or there. Should we be consistent with that wording? To see the last sentence says the owner may choose to engage an alternate firm. However, the town reserves the right to reject. Isn't the town the owner?
Yes. Well, yes.
So maybe just for consistency purposes, there's a couple other, when I was scanning the document earlier today, there's a couple other instances. Maybe just do a quick check of those.
Yes, I just made 27 replacements.
There you go. Yeah.
Done.
And then while we're here, because I missed your project description, just a quick comment here. Should we revise that first sentence under section 8 to remove the words Collier and QA, whatever they are, QA plus M or whatever they are?
So again, I don't have a problem doing that. This came out of the OPM RFP. So
Okay.
if I don't disagree necessarily, Dave, with that.
Okay.
But again, somebody put the RFP together for our services, and that was specifically listed. But yeah, I don't have a problem pulling that out.
Yeah, I think if we remove and QA and M is a couple other spots. We just remove that and maybe just put, instead of design documents or whatever, just put, concepts were put together for a referendum in February. Kind of a general term, Mark.
Yep.
I just don't want to have this go out and have some companies look at it and say, oh, QA and M already did design documents, and dissuade them from submitting potentially. Sorry, I didn't want to get off track too bad, but
Nope, that's okay. I'm not at all opposed to that, by the way.
yeah, that was under, right? I think it's the first couple sentences on section 8.
Yep. No, I scrubbed it.
Yeah, and then
Everybody else agrees with that, by the way, Joe and others. Do you guys agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
yeah, and QA&M shows up somewhere else, 200 budgets, I think, if you wanted to scrub that out too.
I did.
Thanks.
I'm taking that
Thanks.
out. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark.
I need to ask Jacqueline a question. Jacqueline, can you stay with us any longer, or are you running out of your time?
No, I'm here.
Okay,
Thanks.
because the next, actually, I had a specific question that required Jacqueline's input on this submission logistics.
Okay. Yeah. So then the next section is just the logistics of hard copies versus electronic copies. Again, this was something that came out of the OPM, whether it goes to Bill or who wants to get these. They can come to me, and then I can distribute them.
I was going to suggest, and the reason I asked Jacqueline, that we have a single point of contact for all of these, and the distribution would be done by that person. That person would be Jacqueline. But I don't have approval on that yet, and Jacqueline hasn't even heard what I just was going to say. But whatever we do, I'd like it to be a single point where we can go for any document, any email, any correspondence, that one person would have that, all that at their finger, all that in a file, in some document control document location.
Mark, do you guys have some sort of like online storage or something that we could have access to, and then maybe?
Yes, and that would be the other part, would be access, that it would have the ability to be accessed by more than just one person.
Yep.
Do we not have a storage spot set up through the town intranet?
Yeah, I think Jacqueline set that up already, right in the beginning. I know. Paul-
Actually, I think Lauren did, Joe.
Oh,
Lauren,
okay.
yeah, we have that site on, if you log into the town website under the Academy building, we have that separate area for our documents.
That is for documents. But this would be an inquiry, and presumably an inquiry would be a letter, a hard copy letter, or I imagine it also could come in as a an email. Would that be right, Mark? Is there, do we get any of these inquiries, you know, anything, do we get things by email? We get, some of this says electronic, right? One
So,
on
yeah, we're
USB,
talking
I'm
about two
sorry.
things. So inquiries during the process, we generally manage that and they'll come to me, questions, answers, that's all electronic, you know, we'll get the answers electronic, we'll distribute addenda electronically. But what we're talking about here is when you get the qualifications and or proposals, do you want hard copies? Do you want them to actually deliver physical hard copies? If the answer is yes, how many copies and where do they get delivered to? And then the second is, on top of that, there will be electronic copies. Those generally get emailed to the same person. And then those can be uploaded to wherever you want them to go so that you all have access to electronic files. So let's start with the first portion of this. Do you want hard copies of these proposals?
Well, my
I don't have a need for
experience, my
I'd go-
experience
I
is
don't.
old. And mine says yes, but that's 10 years, that's probably 10 years old. So
I'm going with no.
I could be easily persuaded to yes. That, or no, rather, that we do not need a hard copy.
Save some trees.
Yeah, I'd vote no.
Me too.
Me too.
Consensus, love it.
One question is, you know, Joe, to your point of who's collecting the responses, right?
Yes.
I
And
mean-
not only these responses, but other things that are submitted. I mean,
Does
all,
does it create any confusion where Colliers is answering the inquiries, but the responses are going to the town? Does it make sense to consolidate it to OPM? I don't know if you had a thought on why
The only-
sending one versus the other.
the only thing that, the reason I went with the town was access. I don't know, I didn't know if Colliers had a site or a, where we could access files that are submitted or not submitted. And then also anything that's an attachment to an email,
Yeah.
which sometimes is important.
Yeah, and I don't know if the town has requirements too, so I mean, maybe the town requires it.
So again, just
What's
the
easier
R-
on Mark, I guess.
the RFP for our services was written the exact same way that's written here. So that's why we just copied it, because I wasn't sure if somebody, so we have 2 hard copies and 1 electronic copy on a USB thumb drive. So what was submitted to Bill was, you know, 2 hard copies and a thumb drive. And then how Bill got that information to you all, I don't know. So tell me what you want, how you want these to be submitted, and I will, you know.
Well, Bill is probably the wrong person now. I mean, the sort of the way we've moved
Right.
past.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so it's either you or Jacqueline or someone else in the town that would handle that.
Yeah, it's not uncommon for them to come to us either, by the way. We typically do receive proposals and qualifications, and then we do distribute them either hard copies or electronically through a SharePoint site. So we can definitely do that.
That was going to be a question I had, Mark, is that they're going to have to come with a file share site. They're going to be too big for too large for emailing purposes, right?
No, well, it depends. I mean, usually they just send you a link to download it from a SharePoint site. And then we
Right.
download it and then we upload it to a SharePoint site that you would have access to. So,
Okay.
Right. No, I think that makes sense as long as the person that's downloading it knows what to do with it or has
Oh,
the
yeah, yeah,
capabilities
yeah,
of dealing with it.
they're gonna come to me if they come to Colliers, and I'll know what to do with them and how to distribute them and get you access to the SharePoint site that so that you have it all there.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that. My only question would be is the architect's contract is with the town, correct? Directly?
Yep.
And I don't know for that purpose if those RFPs have to go to the town or not. Again, I don't know.
No, that has nothing to do, yeah, that's not a contractual thing, Dave. It's just a
Oh.
logistical thing of how to communicate the proposals to the committee. Again, we've done it both ways.
Yeah, so I'm not opposed with Collier's doing it, Mark. I mean, that's
And
just my perspective.
And
I
and does
agree.
that-
Let them go Colliers.
Does that include change orders too? I mean, do you handle change orders in the same way?
Yeah, well, we're talking about two different things here now, but anything that will come from the architect, whether it's an ad service, we'll see it, we'll vet it before it gets to you. Ultimately, you're going to sign off on whatever, comes. Contracts, we're going to review contract, we'll negotiate contracts, some of the business terms. We'll work with the town's attorney on some of the legal terms. I mean, but ultimately it'll be presented to this committee for sign off. So yeah, it's not uncommon for things to come directly to us.
Yeah, my perspective, Mark, is after this RFP process is done, you guys are going to handle all of the correspondence, right?
A lot of them, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
All I'm looking for is a single point, if there could be one, where all the information of the project is going to be stored. It has that the members of this committee and or other people in on the town have access to it. And at the end of the project, that all that information is not lost.
Joe, that's why you use like a SharePoint site. You can send out documents to certain individuals, all stored in PDFs. Anybody has access to it that has authorization to log in. So I don't know, Mark, is that what you're proposing? Some sort of SharePoint site? So I mean,
100%.
it's a perfect thing, Joe. You'll love it. We use it every day at work. It's great.
Well, I'm very familiar with SharePoint. Matter of fact, when I was leaving, the IT department was going past SharePoint. I didn't quite get involved with what the next step was after SharePoint, but there's a successor to SharePoint that's being adopted. So yeah, I'm very familiar with SharePoint and the sites. The problem with I'll stop there.
Okay.
But I guess for the next meeting, we ought to have some definition of that. And I'll take it on to work with the town to be sure if there aren't requirements, as you mentioned, that we hold some of the documents. Doesn't sound like there are, but be sure. The proposals shouldn't, definitely, Bill McMinn's not the right person. It's either Jacqueline or you, Mark.
Yeah, I changed it to myself.
Or someone like that.
Yeah, I
It's
changed
either
it
that
to myself.
or Aaron or someone on the town that should. And then we would, and then do you have the SharePoint site up that we'd be able to start getting access to as part of this project, or part of this phase of the project?
I'll get it set up for sure. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. And then really the last section of the RFQ is really just what should be in the proposal. Description of the firm, licenses that they have, resumes of key personnel, consultants that they're going to use. We talk about similar project experience, which kind of led to my other comment earlier in the meeting.
And then the 0.5 on 11 says 3 community project centers. I had that crossed out, and it was 3, community centers or like projects. It doesn't have to be a community center if it was some other project that was similar to a community center.
Yeah, I could change it to whatever you want.
What about, Mark, adding something regarding like renovations of historic buildings or something? I don't know if that's pertinent or not.
Yeah.
I mean, because really, we're renovating a historic building more than we're building a community center, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of challenges with that building, as we all know.
Well, we want them to have some experience and be able to demonstrate sensitivity towards dealing with historic issues.
Yep, that's why I just added that, that language in here. And
And I just don't want that description of similar project experience with at least as a minimum to be a knockout. There's no reason for that to be a knockout.
if they don't
Okay,
have
if they-
community center experience,
If they have 2 community centers and a church or a
Okay.
school or something.
I took out the number of community centers. I mean, churches are obviously different than community centers. But again, I could change community center projects to municipal projects, which includes town halls, libraries, you know, senior centers, you name it.
I think there's enough uniqueness to a community center and the uses of it that it's going to be real. If you've never done one before, I think it's going to be really hard for me to get on board with choosing them to do it, to let this be the first one they've ever done, I guess.
You want to go somewhere between not the first one they've ever done, and if they've done 2 community centers and they did a great job on 2 community centers and said, well, sorry, you've only done 2, and we say here you have to do 3. It says right here in point 5.
Yeah, I took out the number and right now it just says experience with renovating historic buildings and community center projects.
Yeah.
Good. That's fine. Perfect.
Okay.
Can we pop back up to number 2
Yep.
and instead of enter name of state where it's, you might want to say Connecticut.
Oh. Okay. And then the last section is just the fee proposal in a separately sealed envelope. Based upon the appendix that we have developed for this. And then there's just the language about the town having the right to terminate the RFP and reject any or all respondents at their own leisure.
And
But
then
you're not
and you're gonna-
responsible to pay them for the development costs.
and then you're going to fill in all the blank spaces in appendix.
So yeah, the blank spaces. So what happens, those are just, they're really not filling in the blanks. They're just, so what'll happen is when we issue the RFP, there will be, you know, the standard form agreement between the town and the architect is literally you know, a 60-page agreement, right? So it'll be the agreement that kind of, if you think about it, Joe, as a booklet, right? You've got the cover that says, okay, appendix A, then the next page is all of everything that's appendix A. Then you get to appendix B
Okay.
and whatever's following it. But yeah,
Okay.
those will definitely be included.
Okay.
I just think it's cool that we have 13 of 12 pages filled out. We've gone above and beyond what it's expected.
Exactly. We've been making a lot of edits here.
Way to go, guys.
All right, so I can reshare this based upon some of the edits I've already made. And I'll do that tomorrow. And then if you want to get back to me with, again, I've highlighted the dates that are going to change. I'm not going to change those quite yet until I know after next meeting where we're going to go. But if you want to get back to me between today and next week, any of your own edits, unless Joe, you want to have a committee conversation about those proposed edits, it's up to you.
If we, as we move through this today, I think the committee will, it would be appropriate for the committee to vote as a whole, the agreement next in the next, after the next meeting. Presumably, there's a full-fledged agreement where we all nod our heads on that, yes, we've made all the changes. Then the committee would approve that agreement as a whole, as opposed to trying to, walk through any of the individual spots where we've made changes. Does that sound good to everybody?
Do you want us to individually send edits to Mark? And then he'll put them all together and then,
You just copy everyone on the committee, but Mark will be responsible for putting
Yeah.
it together. And if somebody makes a, hate to say, some dumbass suggestion, we could, other people could comment in and say, well, maybe we ought to rethink that, or something equally kind.
Joe, do we want to just share the document and everyone can track changes of their own, and then we'll have one document that Mark
Well,
will
we-
have to look at?
We could do that if we had a SharePoint site. I don't know if there's one, if we have one on the one available, because otherwise it would have to be sequential. And the last person on the list could, who knows when they're going to get it. But we
Well,
had
if it's like a
SharePoint site-
Google Doc, you can just share it and go as it goes along, right? And it'll tell you who's in or who's out. Reviewing it at the same time. I don't know, just a suggestion.
yeah, but I think you can do that on SharePoint too, right? So when Mark puts it up and sends it out to us, we can probably all do that.
Do any cloud service works.
Yeah, Google Docs.
Google, Box,
Well, I mean, as long as we're all logged in,
OneDrive.
all have an account to, yeah, I mean, you can send, I mean, I have OneDrive from work, but so as long as it's easy for everybody to use.
Yeah, I have OneDrive as part of Microsoft 365 or Office 365.
Yeah, I think we use OneDrive.
Mark, why don't you see how, if you have the OneDrive,
Yep.
and if we're moving you towards you being the sort of the central point of documents being stored, that why don't you see if you can get that? We would have to have a username and a password for your for the particular OneDrive, and it would have to be unique to us though. You can't have like your grocery lists on it or anything.
You
The
wouldn't want-
OneDrive I have saves everything. It saves
Yeah,
everything.
no,
It saves-
it'll be specific for this project. Okay, I'm sure I just shared the updated document with you all, so you have it right now.
If I go back to the agenda, there might be another place for public comment. Has anyone? Oh, we skipped something on the agenda. Discussion of 2023 meeting dates. We're gonna have to table that. Do I need a, no, Joan's not here. I don't know if I need a motion to table that, that item, discussion of 23 meeting schedule. We would probably table that, not even to the next meeting, but to the following meeting. There's no, there doesn't seem to be any clear dates that everybody can agree to, but I believe Jacqueline sent something around. We could look at it and discuss it. Maybe not the next meeting, either the next meeting or the following meeting, depending when we have time.
Sounds good.
And who is anybody a parliamentarian? Jacqueline, maybe you could help us. How do we memorialize this and close the meeting?
Yeah, I think you're good for that item. You just said, we're looking at it for the next meeting, so we don't need to make a motion. And there are no people on from the public, so you are good with that. So you just need a motion to adjourn.
A motion, we adjourn.
Second,
Hearing no objections, meeting adjourned, and thank you to everyone. This again, productive couple of hours, maybe longer than that, but maybe a little bit longer than we had hoped to do for regular meetings, but this was very productive. Thank you very much.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Good evening,
Bye,
all.
Good.
everybody.
Good evening, everyone.
Talk to y'all soon.